You ever watch a sequel and think, wait, who asked for this? That's M3GAN 2.0 in a nutshell. A movie that took everything people liked about the original, tight horror, creepy kills, viral weirdness, and said, cool, let's do the polar opposite. And now the headlines are rolling in. Box office bomb, Blumhouse misfire, what went wrong? But here's the thing, everyone's pointing fingers at the wrong problems. So let's talk about what really happened to M3GAN 2.0 and why trying to turn your killer doll into a sci-fi action hero was never gonna work. So the big narrative right now is that M3GAN 2.0 flopped because it pulled a genre switch. Variety and The Hollywood Reporter both zeroed in on that. The first movie was a horror flick, classic killer doll setup with a tech twist. The sequel? Suddenly, we're in sci-fi action territory. M3GAN's not the threat anymore, she's the protector. It's the Terminator 2 playbook. Take your villain, make them the hero. But here's the problem. The Terminator was lightning in a bottle. That pivot worked because the mythology supported it. We knew Judgment Day was coming. We knew John Connor was the future of humanity. So when Arnold shows up again, but this time to protect Sarah and John, it's not just a twist, it's a payoff. It deepens the story. M3GAN didn't have that kind of narrative foundation. There was no grand mythos to expand, no looming apocalypse, no resistance leader, just a creepy AI doll and a tight, self-contained story. Turning her into a misunderstood anti-hero fighting a rogue military android? That's not expanding the universe. That's genre whiplash. It's like trying to turn Chucky into RoboCop, and the audience felt that disconnect. Even Jason Blum admitted this. On the Town podcast, he said, quote, "We all thought M3GAN was like Superman. We could do anything to her. We could change genres. We could put her in the summer. We could make her look different. We could turn her from a bad guy into a good guy. And we kind of classically overthought how powerful people's engagement was really with her." End quote. That's not just a quote. That's the thesis statement for why this movie didn't land. They thought they had a franchise icon who could transcend genre. What they had was a horror icon who worked because she stayed in her lane. Now, Variety also points to the sequel leaning harder into the camp that made the first film go viral. And yeah, M3GAN dancing down a hallway before a kill was meme gold. But let's not pretend camp is a bad thing. Camp is a tool, and when it's used well, it's cinematic magic. Ruth Rose, who co-wrote the original King Kong in 1933, once said, if you can't make it bigger, then make it funnier. That's exactly what Son of Kong did. It didn't try to out-monster the original, it leaned into humor. Same with Deathstalker 2, which basically spoofed its own genre. It used to be common for sequels to pivot into comedy when they couldn't top the original scale. But let's talk about what really hurt this movie. The kills, or more accurately, the lack of them. In horror, the kills are the set pieces. They're what people remember. Nobody quotes the plot of Final Destination 2, but everyone remembers the log truck. I still remember the tanning bed deaths from Final Destination 3. Couldn't tell you a single other thing about that movie, but those deaths burned right into my brain. M3GAN 2.0 should have doubled down on that. Give us creative, brutal, unforgettable kills. That's what slasher sequels are built on. Instead, we got a plot about congressional hearings on AI ethics and a rogue android named Ares. That's not horror. That's a rejected Black Mirror episode with a bigger budget. And speaking of budget, let's talk the numbers. The first M3GAN was made for $12 million. It was a textbook Blumhouse success story. Low budget, high return. The sequel? $25 million. Still modest by Hollywood standards, but more than double the original. And it shows. Bigger sets, more VFX, more action, but none of that mattered because the core appeal, the horror, the tension, the kills, all got lost in the noise. Blum even acknowledged that they got too excited by M3GAN and she didn't work. He chalked up the failure to the genre swap, the summer release, and the rushed production timeline. He said, quote, "We've gone over our skis too far. Summer movie, changed the genre, set the date," end quote. That's a rare moment of honesty in Hollywood, and it's worth applauding, but it also confirms what fans already knew. This wasn't the sequel they wanted. And let's not ignore the release date. The first M3GAN dropped in January, a dead zone for theaters. No competition. It had the horror lane all to itself. The sequel? Released in the middle of summer up against F1, How to Train Your Dragon, and Lilo and Stitch. That's not counter-programming, that's setting your movie up to get steamrolled. And this isn't just hindsight talking, this is a pattern. According to Game Rant, M3GAN 2.0's box office struggles are a clear reminder that horror films rarely thrive in the summer blockbuster season. The article points out that horror, especially when it leads into camp or niche appeal, tends to perform best in the fall or early winter, when audiences are more primed for scares and studios aren't flooding the market with billion-dollar IP. Summer is where superheroes, animated franchises, and action tentpoles dominate. Dropping a horror sequel, especially one that's pivoting genres, into that environment is like tossing a slasher into a Marvel movie. Even Jason Blum acknowledged this. He said, quote, "We could put her in the summer as part of a long list of things that they could get away with when treating M3GAN like a franchise superhero. But horror isn't built for that kind of seasonal competition. It thrives in the shadows, not in the heat of July." Ironically, Blumhouse seems to have learned from that mistake, at least on paper. The upcoming M3GAN spin-off Soulmate is already scheduled for release on January 9th, 2026. Directed by Kate Dolan and produced by Jason Blum and James Wan, the film is described as a sci-fi horror thriller in the tradition of 90s domestic thrillers, but with a modern technological twist. It follows a grieving man who purchases an AI android to cope with the loss of his wife, only to discover that his new partner is far more possessive and dangerous than expected. It's a darker, more intimate take on the AI horror theme, and its January release date suggests Blumhouse is steering the franchise back into its natural habitat, the cold, quiet months where horror can breathe. So, what should they have done differently? First, keep M3GAN evil. Don't fix what isn't broken. She's a killer doll, let her kill. Second, focus on the kills. Make them creative, make them brutal, make them memorable. That's what people come for. And third, embrace the camp, but don't let it override the horror. You can be funny and scary at the same time. Just don't forget which one you are first. And if you want a perfect example of how that can work, look no further than the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. That movie leaned way harder into comedy than the original. It was gorier, weirder, and way more over the top. And while it was divisive when it came out, it eventually gained a cult following because of how unapologetically bizarre it was. Tobe Hooper, who directed both films, knew exactly what he was doing. By the mid-1980s, the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre had become a towering figure in horror. Hooper wasn't trying to outdo it. He knew he couldn't. Instead, he leaned into the dark humor that he always felt was present in the first film, but went unacknowledged by critics and audiences. He once said that the original was a comedy that people just didn't get. So with the sequel, he made the comedy more obvious. And it worked, for the people who were willing to go along for the ride. Chainsaw 2 is now remembered for its gonzo energy, grotesque humor, and its willingness to be something completely different. It didn't abandon horror, it just mutated it into something surreal and satirical. Then there's Troll 2, which is infamous for being a sequel in name only. It has absolutely nothing to do with the original Troll, no returning characters, no shared mythology, not even any trolls in Troll 2. The creatures in Troll 2 are goblins. The movie was originally titled Goblin, but the distributor slapped a 2 on it to cash in on name recognition. And yet, despite, or maybe because of, its incoherence, wooden acting, and bizarre anti-vegetarian plot, it became a cult classic. People quote it, host midnight screenings, and celebrate it as one of the best worst movies ever made. It's not good in the traditional sense, but it's memorable and it owns its weirdness. And let's not forget Sleepaway Camp 2, Unhappy Campers. That sequel took the shocking, psychologically twisted ending of the original and followed it up with a slasher that's basically a horror comedy. Angela, now a chatty camp counselor, kills off campers for breaking moral codes, doing drugs, having sex, being obnoxious. It's absurd, it's self-aware, and it's packed with creative kills. It doesn't try to recapture the tone of the first film. It just goes full tilt into its own brand of slasher satire. And guess what? It worked. It found its audience. It's still talked about today. So no, camp isn't the problem. The problem is when you try to do camp, action, sci-fi, and emotional redemption arcs all at once without committing to any of them. That's not genre blending, that's genre soup. And M3GAN 2.0 drowned in it. And finally, don't overthink it. M3GAN worked because it was simple, sharp, and self-aware. Sequels don't need to reinvent the wheel. Sometimes they just need to spin it faster. Now that's my take, but I want to hear yours. Do you think what do you think M3GAN 2.0 should have done differently? Did the genre shift throw you off, or were you hoping for more inventive kills? And while we're at it, what horror movie kill has stuck with you long after the credits rolled, even if you forgot everything else about the film? Drop it in the comments. I genuinely want to know what moments live rent-free in your head.